The first article I wanted to look at is titled, "A Baptist Pastor Delivered a Wildly Sexist Sermon Telling Wives to Lose Weight." This is by Hemant Mehta on the Friendly Atheist website, so let's give it a read and see what it says. Here's some free relationship advice for you. Never listen to Pastor Stuart Allen Clark of First General Baptist Church in Malden, Missouri. During a sermon he delivered on February 21st, which has since been deleted from the church's website and YouTube channel, Clark gave a sermon on how to keep your marriage strong. His answers? The wife needs to look hot, like Melania Trump preferably, and that means losing weight and submitting to her husband's sexual desires at all times, or else it's all her fault when he strays. This compilation below is already cringeworthy, but I suspect some viewers might have a more visceral reaction to the kind of abusive, misogynistic messages he's sending to women. Fair warning, a longer version is here. Okay, let's watch this clip and see what this guy had to say about women.
And ladies, here's the thing you need to know about men. Don't give him a reason to be like this distracted boyfriend.
Oh, getting called out in church. Uh-oh.
You hear me?
Oh, okay, it was a meme. It was a meme he's referring to. Don't be like this distracted boyfriend. And if your boyfriend is like this, it's your fault that he's like this. You're not good enough, so be better.
Don't give him a reason to be looking around. Hello? So, okay, why is it so many times that women, after they get married, let themselves go? Why is it? Why do they do that? Now look, I'm not saying every woman can be the epic trophy wife of all time, like Melania Trump.
Well, that's kind of strange, right? That he's like talking about like Donald Trump's wife and how perfect she is. That's just really odd to me. I don't know. There's something really strange about that.
Like Melania Trump? I'm not saying that at all. Now, most women can't be trophy wives, but you know, like her, maybe you're a participation trophy. I don't know, but all I can say is not everybody looks like that. Amen.
Did he think this through? Did he think this out before getting on this stage and talking? Most pastors have their sermons like written out, right? Or at least have an outline written out. I know I've worked with a pastor before who used to write out his sermons, and he would stand up at the lectern or whatever the holy fuck it's called, and he would like deliver this sermon that he wrote like the week before. Is this guy just kind of winging it, or is this thought out? Because if he's winging it, this is a good insight into this guy's character, into who he is and what he really believes.
It looks like that. But you don't need to look like a butch either. But you say, how can I do that? Oh, I'm so glad you asked that question.
You know, look, I've been live streaming for 5 years, or I've been writing stuff and streaming and talking to people for 5 years. That's a long time. Thousands and thousands of people, millions of people have seen some of my videos and stuff, right? I get that the wrong word slips out sometimes. I get that. 100%. Can't fault him for that. But it's like every single fucking word out of his mouth, he's just sticking his foot in his mouth with every single sentence. I guess he doesn't stand behind it anymore. He probably got a lot of backlash for this, but let's keep listening and then we'll read more about the aftermath.
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that question. I'm so glad you asked that question because you're in my office, you and your husband, and we're talking about your marriage, and you've asked me this question about what can I do about that. All right, if you were sitting in my office, here's the first thing I'd say to you. And boy, I hate to say that. This is why I don't do marital counseling anymore. And that is weight control.
Are you serious? Like he just keeps going. This is every single sentence out of this guy's mouth. It keeps getting worse and worse. This is not a slip up. This is a message that he really thought out and really believed in and really felt like telling everybody. And he spent, this video is only 2 minutes long, but there is a longer version. He spent a long fucking time talking about this. What went through this guy's head? that made him think that it was a good idea to talk about this shit in front of his church?
Control. So how important is this? Let me tell you something. I have a friend. He has put a divorce weight on his wife. That's how important this is.
Put a divorce weight on his wife? Is that where, like, people, like, write a prenup or whatever, and they say, you will remain under 200 pounds or whatever, and if you reach 200 pounds, then I reserve the right to divorce you? You're supposed to be with your significant other for who they are, right? Who in their right mind thinks it's okay and moral and a good idea to do something like that? And why do they put so much emphasis and importance on weight?
He has put a divorce weight on his wife. That's how important this is. You know, makeup is a good thing. You know, one little boy said to the other boy, why do girls wear makeup and perfume? He said, because they're ugly and they stink. You don't want to be ugly and stink.
That's fascinating, because usually when I hear Christians talking about makeup, typically they're talking shit about it. Usually they're saying you're too young for makeup, you don't want to look like a harlot, blah, 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 right? Usually it's like these pastors talking to like 16 to 18-year-olds or even 20-year-olds wearing makeup, and they hate it. They don't think that they should. It's actually really surprising to me that this guy is saying that you are inferior if you don't wear makeup.
Scientists have discovered, by the way, a food that diminishes a woman's sex drive. It's called wedding cake. Yeah.
Yeah, real clever joke. Haha, that was so fucking funny. He sat here and thought this sermon out and wrote it up and delivered it over the course of an hour or more. What was going through his head for the entire previous week that he thought this was a good subject? I just can't even wrap my mind around it. Anyway, let's read this article by Hemant Mehta and see what it says. This is a quote from the video to remind you. Ladies, here's the thing you need to know about men. Don't give him a reason to be like this distracted boyfriend. You hear me? Don't give him a reason to be looking around. Hello? So, okay, why is it so many times that women, after they get married, let themselves go? I'm not saying every woman can be the epic trophy wife of all time, like Melania Trump. Most women can't be trophy-wise, but you know, like her, maybe you're a participation trophy, but you don't need to look like a butch either. Holy shit, dude. But you say, how can I do that? Weight control. I have a friend, he's put a divorce weight on his wife. My little boy said, why do girls wear makeup and perfume? You say, because they're ugly and they stink. You don't want to be ugly and stink. That's just fucking straight up bizarre right there. Just this whole fucking rant is bizarre. Scientists have discovered, by the way, a food that diminishes the woman's drive. It's called the wedding cake. So this is Hemant Mehta speaking. I can't go through all the problems with this thinking here because it's just a lot. But it's disturbing that not a single staffer at this church who knew what he was going to talk about talked him out of it. Like I said, the video is no longer on the church's website, but there's no explanation for that deletion either. It's like they just hope no one will notice. Oops. A couple obvious points that'll come up here. There's an underlying assumption that it's the woman's responsibility to satisfy her husband and be eye candy for him, and that it's her fault if he strays, and that it's her responsibility to make him happy. It's never the other way around. At least that's not the focus of this sermon. He also weirdly implies that all men find the exact same kind of woman attractive and all relationships have the same kind of dynamics, and no woman cares about a man's attractiveness, and no woman has a drive like a man, and all women have less after marriage. Interestingly enough, when I was younger, I was like 12 to 16 or so, I believed that women weren't interested in that. I believed that women didn't have a drive. That's what I thought, because I had no idea. I was taught by Jehovah's Witnesses, grew up around Jehovah's Witnesses, and taught some real ass-backwards stuff about relationships. Come to find out they do. I had no fucking idea that whole time. But I know that this idea is prevalent among a lot of hardcore evangelical Christians, and it's straight up toxic. This is the kind of idea, the kind of ideology that creates incels. Like, that's where this whole thing comes from. This kind of thinking should be concerning to everybody. Back to Hemant Mehta. The fact that he doesn't realize those things aren't universal is telling. Good point. This kind of mentality, as many Christians and former Christians would tell you, is groundwork for abuse. It puts all the weight of a marriage on one person and provides a scapegoat for anything that goes wrong. Whether he implied it or not, there's no set of rules a husband has to follow that's in any way the equivalent of what he's telling women. And the fact that this conversation has been occurring within Christian circles for years now and still never made its way to this particular church is an indication of the bubble these people live in. When reached for comment, General Baptist Ministries, the umbrella organization overseeing this place, issued a pathetic statement without even explaining why they were saying it. If you didn't read anything I just posted, you'd have no clue what they were talking about. This Facebook post is no longer available. It may have been removed. Fantastic. Actually, let me tell you guys something about social media. What this church is doing is actually the correct thing from a social media standpoint. Not from a moral standpoint. Obviously, they're acting like horrific monsters. But if you're explaining, you're losing. That's the saying. If you're on the defensive, you need to keep your mouth shut. Don't say a word. Don't spread the information to anybody else, because the more attention it has, the bigger it gets. So from a social media standpoint, this church is doing the right thing by ignoring it. From a moral standpoint, they're doing the wrong thing. They probably should have fired that pastor. If it's possible, maybe the pastor owns the church. I don't know. If he does, I hope all of the congregants leave, because he's stuck his foot in his mouth a little too deep this time. But what they're doing here is actually in their best interest as a church. Just keep your mouth shut and erase it from history. That's how you're supposed to deal with that stuff if you're on the defensive. So this is a quote from the Facebook post that was apparently deleted. General Baptists believe that every woman was created in the image of God, and they should be valued for that reason. Furthermore, we believe that all individuals, regardless of any other factors, are so loved by God that Christ died for them. Each General Baptist church has autonomy from the national organization, and as a result, General Baptist Ministries does not have authority related to the employment of any pastor or church leader in a local congregation. There you go. So they can't even fire the guy. It's autonomous. He probably owns the church or something like that. Growing up as a Jehovah's Witness, I've mentioned before, my dad was abusive to all of us, like physically abusive, you know. And I remember talking to my mom about like the reasons why it's acceptable to get a divorce and the reasons why it's acceptable to separate from a spouse in the religion. There are 3 reasons why you can separate from a spouse, like live in a separate home, not get remarried, not have any relationships with anybody for the rest of your life, but you can live separately from them if they meet one of these 3 criteria. The only reason for a divorce is is for infidelity. If they cheated, then you can get a divorce and remarry. You're free to remarry in Jehovah's Witnesses. But for separation, the 3 reasons are as follows, if I remember correctly. 1, spiritual, willful non-support, which means they're trying to prevent you from going to meetings. They're trying to prevent you from going knocking on doors. Or it can be as mundane as they just choose not to take part in the religion anymore. They just don't want to do it anymore. They're not going to go to meetings anymore. That's an acceptable reason to separate from your spouse. Kind of fucked up. Reason number 2. What was reason number 2? Let me think for a second. I think it's physical abuse. I should probably look this up. Hang on. Let me switch screens real quick. They've actually apparently changed the wording on them. When I was little, it was physical abuse, willful physical non-support, willful spiritual non-support. Those were the 3, but they've changed the wording. Absolute endangerment of spiritual life is one of them. A spouse may constantly try to make it impossible for the mate to pursue true worship, or may even try to force that mate to break God's commands in some way. Of course, God's commands include going to meetings and knocking on doors. So if you aren't encouraging them to knock on doors or aren't going with them or telling them, no, just forget it, don't worry about it today, or put them in a position where they can't knock on doors because you have something else planned, That would be reason for separation. Extreme physical abuse. Notice the word extreme at the beginning here. My experience was pretty fucking extreme. I literally have scars on my hands. I have literal scars on my hands from growing up dealing with my dad. It was pretty extreme in my case. And the elders kept telling my mom to go back. Anyways, let's read this. An abusive spouse may act so violently that the abused mate's health and even life are in danger. If the abusive spouse is a Christian, congregation elders should investigate the charges. Fits of anger and practice of violent behavior are grounds for disfellowshipping. Okay, so basically what they're saying here is fits of anger and a practice of violent behavior are not reason for separation. Possibly reason for disfellowshipping, maybe. But that's not a reason for separation. It has to be literal danger, in fear of your life. It has to be physical health that's in danger before you can separate from your spouse. And it wasn't bad enough, I guess. The elders in my congregation felt that my life wasn't in danger, even though I literally have scars from my childhood. Literal scars. It wasn't extreme enough to even disfellowship him. The third one, willful non-support. A family may become destitute, lacking basic essentials of life because a husband fails to provide for them, although being able to do so. So basically, this one is if you don't want to get a job and you're capable of having a job, your wife can separate from you, live in a separate home, and take the kids and all of that other stuff. Find it fascinating that the man is the one expected to get the job here, though, right? Like, not the wife. The wife isn't the one who's expected to go out and work. It's the husband. That is a pervasive, insidious belief that spreads throughout all of Christianity. These gender roles are fucking toxic, in my opinion. The fact that women are expected to be in the kitchen and men are expected to be in the workplace and support the woman. It's just toxic. Why do people view it that way? We have to switch this. And that's exactly what we're seeing with this guy right here, Pastor Stuart Allen Clark. All this shit about women, all this misogynistic bullshit, it all roots back to that viewpoint from Christianity. Let's read this Facebook post one more time. It says, General Baptists believe that every woman was created in the image of God and they should be valued for that reason. General Baptist Ministries does not have authority related to the employment of any pastor or church leader in a local congregation. This is Hemant Mehta speaking. That's vague as hell. It suggests they don't take any of this very seriously. It also implies nothing's to happen to Pastor Clark because it's just not their business. Also, the response from women online is none of their concern. It's the theological version of shrug. That's a good point. That's kind of how churches tend to operate, though, isn't it? When they get in trouble, they blame everybody except for themselves. They blame everybody else for their problems. They find excuses anywhere they can. Still, it's more than what Clark and his church have done. Neither of them have issued any kind of public statement regarding the sermon. If he apologized, it's certainly not obvious. If something blows up to a certain point, like this is fucking viral at this point, from a social media standpoint, he is on the defensive, and that means he should keep his mouth shut. But if it gets big enough, as it is now, he should issue a public apology for it. That would be the best way to do it from a social media standpoint. From a moral standpoint, he should have issued an apology from the beginning. He shouldn't have even fucking said it. Back to Hemant Mehta. By the way, I've seen a number of comments online focusing on his looks, like he's one to talk. None of that is very helpful because it doesn't matter who's delivering this sermon or what they look like. It's awful no matter what. Focus on the ugliness of the words, not the person delivering them. That's all. Good point. I appreciate that. I appreciate that point very much, but I feel like it is a little bit relevant here. I feel like he's being maximally hypocritical, and that's something that we see from pastors entirely too often. I don't think anybody is saying he's ugly just for the sake of saying he's ugly. I think it is to point out the hypocrisy. Generally speaking, I want to avoid criticisms of people's looks too. But in this specific case, I think I would link a criticism of his looks back to a criticism of the message. But like I always say, we should be criticizing ideas, not people.